The 2026 Airfix Club release featured a kit I think it's safe to say I'm fairly familiar with. It is, of course, the 1/72nd scale Tiger Moth. This kit is probably the most significant in my model making journey, and it's safe to say that I've made, shall we say, at least a couple. I'm going to stay tuned to the end of the video to see if that's definitely true, but I've made at least a couple of them, and it's nice to have an excuse to revisit it at least one more time. There are already videos published for the unboxing of the entire set and for the build of the other aircraft included the Vigan, so if you'd like to check those out first, pause here, go and have a look and then drop back in. Should be a link above, or at least in the description below if you'd like to. But for now, and for the first time on this channel, if you can believe it, it's time to take a look at how I have built this 1/72nd scale Tiger Moth by Airfix. The original tooling date for this is 2013. This is not to be confused with the earlier 1950s Tiger Moth, which is garbage. This is the 2013 modern released one. There are 42 parts included, although you will not be using all of them. One decal scheme is included in this particular release, and I've put the recommended retail price of $11.99 because that's what the normal release of the Tiger Moth would cost. Obviously, you cannot buy this Swedish version. Normally, you can only buy it from the Airfix Club. We're starting off with a surprise second Tiger Moth. This 2014 era release, I don't know exactly when this one came out, but from about 2014, the Tiger Moth was included in a set with paints and things. The paints are not included in this particular release, but this was given to me as a Christmas present from my Secret Santa, so I thought, why make one Tiger Moth when you can make two? Only the one paint scheme was included in this release, which is the bright yellow. I say bright yellow, it's actually quite a dull yellow, but the RAF training yellow overall scheme, which, whilst not as visually interesting as other schemes, does make it a lot simpler for Airfix in terms of supplying the paints. Most of the decals will be just added to my spares box, and the plastic is grey, otherwise it's exactly the same. Construction begins with the cockpits, as you would expect. You have two seats. They are not just identical seats. One of them has this big extra bulkhead kind of attachment to it, so make sure they go in the right way. And the interior is being painted in interior grey-green from Hataka. This is from their Blue Line range of paints, which means it is formulated for brush painting, although you can thin it and chuck it in an airbrush if you want. I didn't on this occasion due to the just small size of the aircraft. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be particularly visible, so no point. The sidewall detail has then been overpainted in brown, which is more correct for factory-built pre-RAF aircraft. I'll explain that a bit later. Citadel Colours Snake Bum Grey is then being used as a wash. You can see I haven't used it in a while and it has solidified into this hideous gunk, but basically thin it with water, chuck it in, wipe away the excess, and you get this nice sort of depth effect, a little bit of shadowing, just a bit more texture, something to bring out that detail. I've used it loads and it never seems to run out, so that's good as well. The instrument panel decals can be applied, but note how there is a slight difference to them. So the newer one just has an extra couple of colours added on there. The starter set one is a little bit more primitive. They were added to the instrument panels and then glued into the port fuselage half of both, as is the main interior component at this point. There are also some control sticks, which I didn't mention, or control columns, but they are stuck in as well. Just be careful to line those up nicely. And then the fuselage halves can go together, and you can see, for no obvious reason, I've decided to mix and match the toolings. I'm going to have part yellow, part grey. Is that going to come back to bite me on the backside? Well, you're going to have to wait and find out. The bottom of the fuel tank is also a separate piece. This is vitally important to get it right, because if you move it too far to one side, the struts won't fit later. The lower wing can then be stuck onto the fuselage. Note that there is a deliberate angle on the wings, so the fuselage joining bit is flush with the fuselage, the rest of it will be at a slight angle. That is deliberate. And the tail surfaces can also be stuck on. There are supporting struts for the stabilisers, but I am not adding those yet. They will be added later. And the engine has a pin that goes through the back, and then you can glue the propeller blade onto that. If you are very careful with the glue, and you do have to be very careful because this piece is tiny, you will end up with a propeller blade that spins. Although obviously if you don't want that, you don't have to worry about it. We also have the world's smallest intake going on the starboard side of the cowling. I have in the past on a couple of these forgotten about that until much later, but never mind. In this case I did remember. And we got the exhaust piece, which isn't particularly well secured in here. It's always a bit of a pain to get in, but it gives a little bit of detail extending out. The tail fin and rudder are also moulded in one piece, so there is no posability with any of the control surfaces, but that is glued in here as well. Again, just be careful that this lines up properly because it's quite easy to let it droop to one side. On one of these Tiger Moths, I'm now gluing the cowling on as well. I'm not gluing it onto the other one. I'm sure you will see why as we move into the next steps. I always recommend looking ahead in the instructions and at the painting instructions in particular to see if there's any obstacles that you might come across when painting. Finally then we have the main undercarriage, which is comprised of this main piece and then these spars that go just behind the engine. There's a tiny little pin in each and it fits really, really well. My hodgepodge of multicoloured plastic Tiger Moths then can be put to one side for a moment whilst we talk about the painting instructions. Airfix provide just one scheme, which is this rather bright red and yellow 1930s Swedish Air Force scheme, but I've bought an aftermarket set of decals. These are from SBS model and these are Nordic Tiger Moths. Opening the pack, we're going to put the decals to one side and look at those shortly. We have paperwork which comprises of 5 sides of paper. That doesn't feel the most efficient use of space, but never mind. Essentially we've got one big piece of paper which has 4 sides, and then we have an extra piece which is only printed on one side. That's your 5th. But you see we have 4 schemes included. We have this Danish one which is all silver and rather nice. Well, I say silver, aluminium dope. We have a Swedish one which is all aluminium dope, which again is rather nice. Nothing on the back there, that constitutes that random 6th bit of paper. And we have a Finnish scheme which is very simple but green over aluminium with some yellow highlights. And the 4th scheme included is very similar to the one that Airfix have included in that it is the yellow and red, although they call it camouflage. It's obviously not camouflage as such, it's to attract attention. The difference between these is very important for me. The Airfix one has curved red divides. You can see on all surfaces the yellow and the red divide is a big sweeping curve. It's a straight sharp edge on the SBS one, so that's the one that I will be doing. Moth number 1 then will be painted in this Vallejo white primer. This is airbrush ready, although I do find that it can do with a couple of drops of thinner as well. It does have a tendency to clog if you don't. This is sprayed on all surfaces and this will need a couple of coats. Not because of the grey, but because of that hideous yellow plastic. I do not like working with this yellow plastic. It is just bright, garish. It just requires more work to cover the bloody thing up. I don't like it. If you're going to paint a yellow aircraft, you should paint it over either white or pink, depending on how vibrant you want it. So why would you ever mould it in yellow? It just annoys me. Anyway, rant over. Time to get out the yellow paint, and I'm using this Model Air RLM 04, which is also an appropriate colour, according to Vallejo anyway, for RAF Trainer yellow. I do find that it is an almost perfect match when you paint it over white primer. A lot of aircraft of this period tended to not be too vibrant in their yellow. It tended to be a bit more subdued, so I find personally a white primer with this paint over the top gives that effect rather nicely. Wouldn't necessarily do it for a civilian aircraft, but certainly for a military one. The paint does lack a bit of opacity, so you have to make sure that the white is perfect beneath it and expect a few coats of yellow. But with all of that done, it's time to mask, and you can see why I've gone for the straight edged one now, because it's a lot easier to mask a straight edge than a curved edge. So masking tape out, and this is what I've done. Out comes the red, and I've gone for RLM 23 for the simple reason of it's the only appropriate red that I've got. Again, this paint does lack a bit of opacity, so you really need to make sure that the primer is good underneath. If you paint it over a white primer, you get a redder finish, obviously. If you paint it over yellow like I'm doing here, it's a tiny bit more orange, but I really like that. I tested this on a previous build, just testing colour combinations, and this worked out really nicely. And now I can demonstrate why I left the engine area off one of them, because this needs to be painted red and is joined to a yellow plane. Whilst I generally dislike masking, I do enjoy peeling that masking tape off to reveal the goodness underneath, as long as, of course, it hasn't bled everywhere. And in this case, there was practically no bleeding whatsoever. However, there was a misalignment of the tape on the top wing. Whoops, and no, I'm not going to correct that. Hataka True Blue comes out, and this is going to be used to paint the rudder stripe. There are decals included both from SBS and from Airfix for this. However, I really don't like rudder decals, and I've made a 1/48 Swedish Tiger Moth, and it was an absolute pig trying to get it on, so it's just easier to paint. In this case, it's a straight line, tiny bit of tape, done, so that's what I'm doing, and the colour match is pretty close as well. The Swede is then going to be put to one side as I show Tiger Moth number 2, which is being painted in Vallejo's black primer. Pretty much exactly the same story as with the white. This is a tiny bit thin at times, even though I would still say it needs a little bit of thinner, but sometimes this needs a couple of coats, sometimes one is just fine. Painting over the yellow plastic is very satisfying because at least I get rid of the yellow, but it did need a second coat. No matter what you paint over that yellow plastic, it's going to need more coats than you'd expect. AK Interactive 3rd generation acrylic paint sets are being used. That's a very long way of just saying some AK paints. This is a Finnish Air Force paint set, although one of the paints is black and you can just get black from anywhere, but I'm using the Command Green, which is appropriate for the top surfaces of most Finnish aircraft of the Second World War-ish period, because don't forget, Finland didn't take part in the Second World War. They were having their own kerfuffles just coincidentally at the same time. These paints are also formulated for brush, so I've thinned mine with a little dash of water. For the undersurfaces, I'm going for some Vallejo Silver. As the Tiger Moth was a fabric-based plane, this should not be overly metallic, so I'm not bothering about glossing the black underneath or anything like that. I'm just spraying it so it looks like a silver paint. I've only recently acquired the Vallejo Silver, so it's my first experience with it, and it's okay. I hate spraying metallic paints. They always just seem to spit everywhere and clog up the airbrush afterwards, but it seems fine. I'm then using some Insignia White, so I've masked off the undersurfaces and the fuselage band, which will be yellow, and I'm painting those white to give it that white base that I mentioned for the Swedish one, which means no surprises as to the next paint which makes an appearance, because it is, once again, the Vallejo RLM 04 Yellow, which will now go over all of those white bits, on the assumption, of course, that those white bits were fully dried at the time. Always wait for your white to dry fully before you paint yellow over it. This was fine, but I have made that mistake in the past. Both of the aircraft were then given gloss varnish, which I didn't show because it's just watching something get slightly shinier, but they are now both ready for decals. The SBS set includes insignia essentially for one aircraft, so you've got 8, which is enough for one complete aircraft because the silver one has the same decals on the wings. As such, what I'm going to do is use the Airfix insignia. Anything which I can use Airfix, basically I will, but anything unique to this scheme I'll be using from SBS. So it's a bit of a weird mix. These walkways, for example, are Airfix, and as they are printed by Cartograph, I am very, very experienced with using these things, and they are absolutely fine. They're excellent quality. I've never had a problem with them. For any decals that identify this particular aircraft, I am using the SBS set, and it doesn't mention who prints these, at least I don't recall it mentioning that, but they are absolutely fine. They're perhaps not as good quality. They take a little bit more care and they seemed to be more liable to wanting to fold over from time to time, but they are good quality. They went on without too much fuss, and I would definitely be happy to look out for more products from them. If I remember correctly, I bought them because they were discounted. I want to say they were £6 for enough for 4 aircraft. I mean, not quite 4 aircraft, as you see, there are some shared Swedish components, but definitely 3 aircraft, if not 4 if you're clever like me and using the Swedish ones from the Airfix set. So for about £6-ish, I think that is absolutely fine. Moving on to the Finnish aircraft, there are very, very few decals for this one. It comprises of just national insignia on the fuselage and wings, and then the registration, which I always like the Finnish registrations because the first letters refer to the aircraft, so it's MO because it's a moth. It's just so simple. It just pleases that part of my brain. Anyway, these ones also went on without any real problem, and I did measure the stripe before. So I measured the decals to work out how big the stripe should be before putting them on. So if you're wondering why it more or less looks as it should on the instructions, it's because I used a ruler. See? Planning. I can be clever at times. Windscreens are provided injection moulded, of course, because it's Airfix. They are tiny. They're obviously overscale because it's injection moulded plastic on an incredibly tiny plane, but they go in. Remember to get them the right way around, because even though they always look identical to me, I have had problems when I've tried to put them in the wrong way before realising what I've done. And we've also got these struts that hold up the tail surfaces, so they can go on at this point. This is why I kept them separate. It's so that I could paint them yellow on the sprue, basically, and masking around that would have been an absolute pain. We can now move towards putting the top wing on, which in a lot of biplanes is a stressful, sad experience, but Airfix have made this kit so well that it's only a slightly stressful experience, and that's just because of the scale. I always start with the centre struts first, so they're dried on the top wing. We've got these bracing struts, these side struts. They are moulded in one piece. As you see, you've got a little arrow and it says P on one side, S on the other, and the arrow makes sure you point forwards, and it means that you can put them both in at exactly the right space, exactly the right angle, and then very, very gently apply some pressure on the top wing to make sure that they all set. It is about as easy as you're going to get on a 1/72 scale biplane. We've also, of course, got the wheels. Oh, and I didn't mention it, I did spray varnish on them to keep the decals safe. I just very rarely actually show any varnish. The incredibly fragile tail skid is then glued in. It's glued in last to avoid me breaking it, because I've broken a lot of them over the years. And now that everything is set, you can cut away the excess plastic which holds these two struts together. This is incredibly fragile. Be very, very careful with it, and preferably leave the plane either in a clamp or something. I'm holding it in my left hand just so that I can angle it to the camera to show you, but I wouldn't actually recommend you holding the plane when you do this, because you might slip. And one slip means broken Tiger Moth. These two moths are noteworthy for being the first two that I have ever rigged. Yes, I hate rigging, even though I love biplanes, and most of the time I'm incredibly lazy and leave it. So I thought I would actually, for once, as I've gotten quite a lot of experience with rigging lately, get out my AK elastic rigging and give this one a shot. I'm gluing them in pairs, so I glued a couple to the bottom wing, and then when I flipped it over, you stretch one out, tiny dab of super glue, hold it about 4 or 5 seconds, or at least until you think it's about to bite, and then you can gently release, and fingers crossed it won't elastic itself back across the other side of the plane. Once you've done one side, so in that case I've done the back, you can move forwards and do the front. As this step is always one of the hardest to film, I filmed it again so we can show it in as many different angles as necessary. So this is putting it on for the first time, so I've got a tiny dab of super glue. I'm actually just trying to sort of move it around and make sure it bites in the right place. That's going to the rear strut on the fuselage. The next rigging cable is going on the same strut, so whilst it is still slightly wet, I'm putting that in. The quicker drying super glue, the worse this is, but you also need quick drying super glue for this bit, which is, now that I've got the wire glued on one side, you pull it over and then you attach it to the cable at the back, or the strut at the back, if that makes sense. So you kind of need a mix of super glues. I'm a bit lazy and I'm only using one, which is a medium dry, but that is essentially how it works. Tiny bit of guitar string is being used to apply the super glue, so you get the tiniest drop possible, and I keep cleaning that off so you get consistent size of applicator, essentially. Hope that makes some sort of sense. Maybe one day I'll do a proper tutorial on it. Even though I'm still not a fan of rigging, I have done enough of it recently, and I've had enough experience with this particular product that I feel fairly competent at it now. So with that, I declare 2 more moths ready to enter the family. At the end of my reviews, I like to go over the pros and cons and just generally talk about the experience that I had when building the kit. But I'm actually going to struggle being fair and objective in this one because this kit means so much to me. Basically, as a brief summary, I've been making models since I was a child, usually with the help of my father, and then it got to a point when I was a teenager that I would start making models on my own, and one of the planes I've always liked is the Tiger Moth. Now, in 2013, this came out and was the best Moth on the market because it was replacing the older Airfix one, which is the wrong shape, or the Pavla one, which I don't think as a teenager I really had the skill set for, but this was just before AZ/KP released a Tiger Moth, so it really was the only way that I was ever going to make a Tiger Moth, and I built it, and my opinion of Airfix changed overnight. It went from, this is an unreliable brand that will sometimes throw out tat, and sometimes throw out much better tat, to, oh wait, these guys actually know what they're doing. So I went out and I bought lots of these. I've made them, I don't need the instructions when I build them, I know them inside and out, and I love this kit. However, in the interest of balance, I will say that there are a couple of things I'm not a massive fan of. For example, the tail skid is incredibly flimsy. It's just so easy to break. You just put it on a shelf and leave it and you should be alright, but otherwise you're probably going to have to repair it at some point. Whilst these two were fine, there are often problems, and it has been from the very first release of 2013, with flash around the struts on the fuselage, and it's really hard to put the wing on without breaking those, or it's really hard to remove the flash without breaking the struts, therefore it's really hard to put the wing on. So there are some moulding issues that have been present on some of them, but not these. And if I'm being really pedantic, there's no fuel line running from the fuel tank to the engine, so strictly speaking the engine wouldn't work on these things anyway. To balance those slight negatives out though, there are so many things I do like about this kit, such as the variations that you get. You can have the doors, the hatches for the pilots open or closed. You can have anti-spin strakes, even though neither of these have either of those features. They give you these extra things, and you can use the later tail wheel as well, because some of them were given a steerable tail wheel at the back rather than a skid. They give you that in the tooling, even though I don't think they've ever actually released a version which requires it. And all of this with Airfix's usual buildability. It's an easy kit to build. Limited run biplanes are an absolute pig because the struts might be a tiny bit mismatched in their size, or there's no locating pins for them. Airfix have really thought about it with the way that you put the struts together. Everything just works for a beginner as well as for somebody who's more intermediate. And you don't even need to worry about the rigging because, well, I suppose actually there's at least 3 reasons. 1, because it's your plane, you can do what the hell you like. 2, it's 1/72nd scale and thus it's really small. But 3, if you actually look at the product listing on the Airfix website, not for this one, but for the main release of the Tiger Moth, they haven't even added all of the rigging. They've just sort of done this half rigging look, and it still looks absolutely fine. So I guess if it looks like that and Airfix think that's okay, then yeah, sure, fine. I did not set out to build 14 of the same tooling, but there's just something about this kit that just keeps on dragging me back. Oh, and the shots I'm showing here will only show 13 because I have actually thrown one out. So I have 13, but I've built 14. And they're all in different colours, and they're bright, and they just stand out, and they just make me happy. And it's an enjoyable experience building it, and it's an enjoyable experience looking at them. Yes, as I said, I'm a little bit biased. To just go back to something that I mentioned when there wasn't time to discuss it, the cockpits are painted brown because the RAF built or commissioned a lot of Tiger Moths, and when they were built they were nearly always interior grey-green on the inside. A lot of Tiger Moths that are around today date back to that period. They were bought from the RAF second-hand. When de Havilland built them for other people before the Second World War, they were generally a little bit more de Havilland-y, and brown interiors are more common. I'm pretty sure that is correct. Obviously there are going to be variations because there were ones that were built in Australia, but again, that's after the war had started. That's just to clarify why the interior can be different. Again, all these things that I love about this aircraft, you can just make loads of them and they're all slightly different and quirky in their own way, and Airfix have helped you out by giving you these tooling variations, etc. In terms of these 2 specific Tiger Moths, I'm really happy with the yellow and red. I've done the 1/48th Tiger Moth in this scheme before, and I didn't get it right. I'm happy to admit that I didn't. I used the wrong primer, I had some spluttering going on, I didn't mask it properly, and it just became a bit of a nightmare, although I did get it done and the end result is still fine. But even with the slight masking mistake on the top wing, this one is just so much better, and I'm really glad that I've tackled a kit which involves my 2 least favourite colours to paint anything, yellow and red, and got a result that I am happy with. The finish scheme was chosen to go with a small collection I've got of other Finnish Air Force aircraft. I just like the fact that the Finnish would acquire aircraft from anywhere. Anyone that was happy to give them an aircraft, yep, fine, we'll take it. And so you can have a collection, all in matching colours, of just aircraft from all over the world. It's just interesting, and even though it's a relatively bland scheme, I'm very happy with it. So let me know what you think. Do you like the look of these 2? Do you think I've done a good job? Do you think I should buy more and do better jobs, maybe? And is there a kit that is in your life that has the same sort of impact as this one has had to me? Is it something that you built at one point and went, wow, this is amazing? What was it? If you've liked this, give it a thumbs up. If you've disliked it, give it a thumbs down. And if I've managed to talk at you about Tiger Moths for long enough that you're thinking, fine, Captain, I'll just go and buy one, then there'll be an affiliate link in the description and I can get some money for selling you Tiger Moths, which is a win-win because you get Tiger Moths, I get some money for selling you Tiger Moths, and Airfix sells Tiger Moths. Everybody wins with more Tiger Moths. You know who else wins through Tiger Moths? My channel members, because as one of the benefits you get little emotes that you can pop into chat, and one of them is my 1/48 scale Tiger Moth, which is in the same colours as this one. You can be a channel member if you would like. You get weekly updates, well, usually weekly updates of what's on my bench, and I usually work a fair bit ahead, so you'll get lots of spoilers. There can be polls and things as well, and just general dialogue, and of course you get to support me in my obsession with Tiger Moths. So thank you very much to my existing channel members. If you want to join them, link below. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. Just watching the video is enough for me. And on that note, hopefully you will go and watch another video, and I will see you in a comment section somewhere in the future. For now, for at least the next couple of days, that is me done for Tiger Moths. Maybe I'll be doing another one in the future. Stay tuned. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. I really do like Tiger Moths.